Hi, and welcome to episode 60 of the Give Me a Crown Knitting, Spinning and Bits and Pieces podcast. My name's Nina, also known as Give Me a Crown across the internet, and today is Tuesday the 6th of December 2016. I normally record on Mondays, but I somehow got just too busy yesterday that I didn't get a chance to record, and today there's some rain showers going through the central west of New South Wales in Australia where I'm living, so hopefully you can't hear too much of the rain on the roof. Today is actually also the Finnish Independence Day, so for those who don't know, I'm from Finland. So I thought that I would wear a sort of blue top with a little bit of cream. So this is the Isla top that I finished recently. I'm wearing it over a long sleeve shirt because it's a little bit chilly here after some very, very hot days. So I have a couple of finished objects this week. I don't have any spinning, and then I also have a few works in progress or one work in progress, I think, as well as some acquisitions and a bit of chatter at the end. And might as well get on with the finished objects, which I've put here. So this is my first finished object. It's another little sock that I've knit, and this one I knit with some Red Gear yarn that I bought quite a few years ago, and I think I knit my second pair of socks with this yarn. This is a basic sock that I knit with 24 stitches. I did knit some pearls on the ribbing instead of doing a 2x2 ribbing or something like that. I knit the leg, I did a fish lips kiss heel, and then the foot, and I knit these with 10cm or 4-inch double pointed needles, so just some nice little short DPNs, and they were 2.25mm or US size ones. So I thought that I would do that one to go with my other little ornament that I knit the other week, which had a different heel on it. And I'm not sure yet whether these are going to go on the tree or whether I'll just hang them around randomly, and I kind of think that they can hang around all year round. They're kind of cute little ornaments. So not too much more to say about that. It was fun to do the fish lips kiss heel after a long time having done other types of heels, so I think I might be using that again on some other socks that I do in the future. My next finished object are my scrappy socks. So they look like this, and I think they've turned out really, really nicely. So this is the second sock that I've knit, that I finished off last night. I wove in all the ends, and they're a little bit damp because I gave them a bit of a wash, and I'm really, really thrilled with them. I think that they look amazing. There's something amazing with using yarns that I've been using in my sock yarn blanket and seeing them knit in the round. So there's some yarns in here that I've knit in the round because I've been sent them as minis from other people, and when they're knit in the sock yarn blanket you sort of lose the patterning effect that comes with some of them. So there's one yarn here that has a bit of a spiral effect with the purple on the orange, for instance, that it doesn't come up like that in the blanket. You don't need much yarn for these types of socks. Really tiny little nuggets of leftover yarns works well. And the way that I've been changing my colours is probably not the most logical way. I know that there's some magic knot methods so that you don't have to weave in ends. There's also ones where you sort of loop the two yarns together somehow, and so somehow the join just sort of stays in there. I did the boring way of having lots of ends to weave in, but what I did was when I was changing yarns, I would knit one stitch with the old and the new yarn, and then I'd leave the tails hanging and then keep knitting. So doing the one stitch with the two yarns, I don't find it makes it too bulky or anything like that, and it just sort of ties them together so that there's no holes where you've changed the yarn. I've also made sure that I was changing the yarn at different places so that when I was weaving in the ends I wouldn't sort of get a ridge along the back, for instance, where all the tails were woven in. So the sort of tails are woven in various places. I didn't count the rows when I was knitting these. I figured that with the different although they're all fingering weight yarns, some are a little bit thicker, some are a little bit thinner. So I figured that the row gauge might actually change between some of the yarns. So I just sort of roughly measured as I was knitting along to make sure that they were approximately the same length of leg and then the same length of foot. So they seemed to be okay by doing that. I used a slip stitch heel on these, and I found that I mentioned last week that I'm finding it strange that my gauge is tightening up so much that I'm using a lot more stitches on my socks than what I used to. But I also found on these that the instep, just sort of where your ankle happens, is a little bit tighter, so the stitches are getting pulled out a bit when I put these on my feet. And it doesn't really matter wearing these around, no one's going to be staring at my ankles that closely, I would hope. But I think part of it might be the way that I'm doing my heel. So the heel that I do, when you turn it, I calculate sort of a third of the stitches for each side and then a third in the middle. But because I had 64 stitches on the sock, I had 32 stitches on the heel. So I had, when I got to the heel turn, I decided to do 11 stitches, 10 stitches, 11 stitches. I think that's right, yep. 11, 10, 11. So that the width of the heel was only 10 stitches, and I was sort of doing the turns on the 11s. But perhaps what I should be doing is doing 10 stitches, 12 stitches, 10 stitches. What that would mean is that you end up with a couple of extra stitches on the heel flap, which means that you'd have a couple of extra stitches around the instep. You'd have to decrease a couple more stitches as you go along, but I think the extra couple of stitches might actually help this sock fit me better. So next time, rather than try to have the smaller amount of stitches on the heel, in the middle of the heel, I'll put the smaller amount of stitches on the sides of the heel. If that makes sense, hopefully it makes sense. But I think that by having a few extra stitches on the instep, I would possibly reduce some of the stretching that goes on there, and I don't mind decreasing a few extra stitches as I go along the gusset. So that's my little pondering that I was having as I was knitting on this heel. I knit these with 9-inch circular needles, or a needle, 9-inch circular needle, and at first it was a bit slow, but afterwards it was zooming along. The only part that I didn't really enjoy was doing the heel, so I think next time I would probably try to do an afterthought heel, which is something that I've been meaning to try for a very long time, but I've never actually gotten around to doing. But I think that just knitting a tube on the 9-inch circulars in stockinette, it sort of zooms by. I'm still not convinced it's faster than my double pointed needles, but I think that just being able to pick it up without having to rearrange my needles or anything makes it, in a way, faster. And it's kind of satisfying, just knitting around and around and around. I'm daydreaming of my next pair of socks. I'm really quite keen to do a pair which has got browns, greys, blacks and whites. I think that that would be quite stunning, but I think I need to increase my stash a little bit before I have enough to do that. I put out the call on Instagram about what colour toe I should knit for this second sock, and there was lots and lots of wonderful suggestions. There was oranges and turquoises, and quite a few people suggested blues and purples, so I went with a bluey purple Renanoli yarn that I had, and I've also got that in a stripe along here, so I thought that was nice to have. It's the only yarn that I doubled up on, but it makes these a bit of a pair by having the same yarn in both of them. So they're my wonderful scrappy socks. Definitely keen to do another pair. There was just something fun about being able to choose the colours and see how they knitted up, and thinking about all the people who have given me yarns and all my projects that I've knit with the other yarns, and I think they're stunning. very proud of myself. So that was fun. I'll put them down here. My works in progress. There is only one, yeah. I managed to get my 1 square done for my sock yarn blanket, and I have tails everywhere. I haven't woven these in, whereas I did weave in all the tails of my socks, and very proud of myself for doing that because there was a lot of ends. But I knit this square, this sort of black and purpley yarn, and I had a bit of a boo-boo because I meant to be only knitting 1 square from any yarn into this blanket, but after I knit it I realised that I've already used it down here, so it's the same yarn. It's on the opposite side of the blanket, and I think it might just be that when people get to use this blanket, I'll say to them, can you find the doubled up yarn and see if they can find it. So it's one of those sort of memory game kind of things by having to look around and see which yarn has been used twice. But that's one little square in there. I've still got a few more to go before I finish off this particular row, and then I'll try to take a photo of how the blanket's looking so far. That's it for all that I've been working on crafting wise, but I went to the Millthorpe markets on Sunday, which is a large Christmas market in a village near here. I think it's about half an hour drive, and it was very busy, it was very hot. Got there at 9:10, it had opened at 8:30, and it was very, very hard to get a parking spot. The whole village was basically overrun by cars, but managed to get one and had a bit of a wander around. And I found the Adagio Mills stall. I love Adagio Mills. They're a local mill here near here in Orange, and the lovely Nadine was there, so I had a bit of a chat to her, and I picked up this pack. So this is a sampler pack of some of their natural alpaca yarns. So there's little minis in lots and lots of different colours, and they're all labelled individually so that you can find out which alpaca blend it is. And it comes with a pattern for a hat. So I'm not sure yet whether I'm going to knit the hat or whether I'm going to turn these into something else that's pretty special. They're amazing colours. I don't actually know how many there are. It looks like 2, 4, 6... I think there's possibly 10 different colours in here. So it's going to be fun playing around with that. And she also had in her stall her normal range of yarns, but she also had some new knitting needles that a woman or a small business in Orange has developed called Easy Purlers, and they're sort of special knitting needles that help people learn to knit, and they have a little nub on the end so that the stitches don't fall off. And Nadine sort of she cast on, and she showed a little bit about how they work. She'd only just cast on, so it was a little bit tricky to get the first sort of row happening, but I'll put in the video here of her giving it a go.
I'm used to doing it. That cast on edge is not behaving itself, but she had a set done there that was so easy.
It's working.
Yep. So this is probably not, because I'm using the cast on edge, it'll be tighter than when you're normally doing it.
Yeah.
When you swap it over. And the lady who's designed this was, she's in Orange as well. So, so it's all very locally done. They've been made in Queensland. So,
Wow.
Queensland, yeah.
Yeah, I was going to ask that whether they're...
So now that I've got off my cast on edge, it just goes so easily. You want to have a turn?
Perfect.
And I then gave it a whirl, and it seemed to go okay. So I was using continental knitting, and it's definitely fiddly after you're used to just your stitches sliding off your needles. But I can understand that for kids in particular who are practicing, they are a good idea because they stop the stitches from falling off the needle while they're sort of doing their wraps and what have you. So there's something to look out for. There's a website for Easy Purlers where you can order the needles as well if you're trying to teach somebody to knit. I also picked up a few other things at the market, which I'll show in a minute, but still on the knitting related thing, I just thought I'd show this. This is a little pouch, a snap pouch that I've added into my Etsy shop, the Give Me a Crown Etsy shop. This was one of my prototypes, so it doesn't have my label on it. The ones in the shop have got a little label on the side, but they're just little pouches with a snap on them that can be used for storing stitch markers. And I've also discovered that my 9-inch circulars can fit in there well. So the stitch markers sit in there and they won't fall out as you sort of shake it around like that. There's a tight enough sort of turn on the edge. So they're up in my Etsy shop now. I've got a bunch of different fabrics that I've been using for them, but I can also often use fabrics for project bags that are in my shop to make these as well. So if you do want one and you don't see it in the fabric that you want, then just drop me a note on Etsy and I'll check if I can make one up for you. So that's it for the knitting content, but at the Millthorpe markets I also picked up a little bit of pottery. So I picked up this bowl, and it's a spoon bowl, so you can put your spoon there while you're making a cup of tea or something, but I think that I might use this for some pens, so I'll just sit the pens in there, or I could use it for some double pointed needles to sit in there and put some stitch markers in there or something. But lots of uses. I just love the brown in there. And this was made by Hillgrove Pottery, who are in Murrum Bateman, New South Wales, and the gentleman told me where that was, but I've already forgotten. I think it was on towards the Central Coast somewhere. So that was a pretty piece of pottery. And then I've been playing around with my garden, and it's not going super well, the one that I've sort of dug up and tried to plant things in. Some things are starting to grow, but I then decided to get some little, are they seedlings, when they've already been planted and you get them from the nursery. And so I tried to get some carrots and some lettuces so that I could plant them in and I'd have them sooner than waiting for seeds to grow. But the birds have decided that they're very tasty, so they've been coming along and pulling out my poor little carrot seedlings, which was very disappointing. I've been trying to shove them back into the ground, but I'm not sure they're going to make it. So I've hung up a string and hung some CDs from the string, so that hopefully just the reflection of the CDs is going to distract the birds and they won't go and eat them. But when I was at the markets, I saw this seller who had Australian wind spinners. They're manufactured and distributed in Australia, and they have all sorts of different shapes. Mine is a little bit like this. It's a diamond shape, but it's a smaller version than that. But they're stainless steel and they spin around in the air, and the company is called Artworks Australia, and that sort of shows off a few more of the different styles that they've got. So they had all sorts of different things that they cut into them. I guess they laser cut them or something, but they were pretty spectacular. And so I've now got that in my garden spinning around in the wind and trying to distract the birds. And since I put the CDs up and the wind spinner, no one's come and taken anything from the garden, so I think they are working there. Just the reflection of the light is distracting the birds. But I'm not sure after all this rain whether or not that's going to be true, because the garden will have lots of lovely worms and bugs that the birds are going to go and want to eat. What else? One little tip, if you are watching on YouTube, I've noticed that there's quite a few podcasters who are doing daily video vlogs or video logs or something. So I'm finding it really hard to actually keep up with the podcasts that I like, because suddenly there's so many different podcasters are actually putting out videos every day. So what I discovered was that on YouTube there's these 3 little dots underneath the video, and you can actually hide it from your subscriptions. So sadly I am hiding some videos from podcasters that I would normally watch, but I just don't have enough time in my day to be watching sort of 10-minute videos from everyone every day when I can't keep up with my other podcasts. So I'm hiding them. I figure that I can always go back and have a look at their video channel and then watch all the individual vlogs when I've got a little bit more time. But that's just a bit of a tip, that if there are some videos in your subscription feed that you don't have the time to watch, then you can actually hide them from your feed, because I was finding it really difficult to actually find the weekly or fortnightly podcasts from podcasters that I really want to watch, because there's just too many. But I think it's great that people are putting out lots of content, but unfortunately time is limited for me. So summer is here. We've had some days in the sort of 35-degree temperatures and very hot and humid and what have you, but now the rain is here, which is wonderful. It definitely needed to cool down. There's just been that hot, sticky feeling in the air, but that has sort of also made me not want to knit quite so much. So I'm kind of grateful for a little bit of rain in between, and I need to get some new projects cast on, and I want to figure out what I'm going to spin next. So I think project-wise I've got a cardigan on the needles, but that's a little bit hard in the humid heat to have it on my lap and be working on. So I need to think of a couple of smaller projects. I have one pair of socks in a project bag that was for travel knitting that sort of fell by the wayside, so I might pick that one up again. But I want to maybe make a few more ornaments and little things. So I'm sure by next week I'll have some more projects on the go. But I will wrap it up here, because probably the rain on the roof is driving you nuts, and I don't want that. So I hope that you're well and getting lots of crafting done, and your weather is a little bit more reasonable than what mine is. And yeah, I hope that everyone is just happily waiting for holidays and relaxing, and that all things are going well. I'll see you soon.